Hello everybody, AVT here, and I am back with another video for Star Wars Galaxy's Legends. And today I wanted to talk to you all about my Juggernaut Commando build. Now this build is pretty good in solo PvE. It's not going to be quite as durable as the Frontman build, but it's going to put out pretty significant damage. We're talking, between 7 to about 9,000 DPS, even single target. And obviously if you have a swap macro that would be higher in burst, but that's going to be your pretty consistent single target DPS, obviously going much higher when you're fighting multiple targets. You're going to dish out a ton of damage. It's really good in PvP, it's really good in group PvP, solo PvP, and group PvE content. It's okay in solo PvE, but I'd say it's much more suited to group PvE content where you're just looking to put out that heavy damage. So let's go ahead and jump right into it. We'll go ahead and we're going to start with my armor, weapon, and jewelry set. Alright, so diving right on into the armor and weapons, I am actually running a set of the Snow Trooper armor, and that's just for this additional cold resistance. Sorry, wrong one. I'm getting an additional 500 cold protection out of it. You absolutely do not need the Snow Trooper armor, it's just what I chose to use for this build. Since I went all in on the Devastation, I figured I'd just go all in on the armor as well. But for my base 35s, I'm running Luck, Precision, and Strength. Now I know this Luck is pretty unorthodox. Most people like to run Precision, Strength, or Constitution, or some variants therein. I chose the Luck just because I find I don't need the additional Constitution. I actually make up for that Constitution by running Breath of Heaven, and then I also have the Biological Focus Crystal. And between those two items, I don't really feel the lack of Constitution in my standard 35s. So, some people may choose to use Constitution. That's totally fine. But this is what I decided to go with for my standard 35s. And then onto the exotics, I am running Devastation, Heavy Weapon Critical Chance, and Heavy Weapon Damage. Now the Devastation modifier bit, just as an FYI, is going to be pretty expensive. On the low end, you're probably going to be running about 28 million to buy the junk loot required to make one Devastation modifier bit. So, if you're looking for more of a Juggernaut build, I would probably swap, or not a Juggernaut build, a budget build for Juggernaut. I would probably swap the Devastation out for Heavy Weapon Action Cost until you have enough credits to go ahead and switch over to the Devastation, because it is pretty beneficial. So those are the 35s that I'm running on, or those are the exotics I'm running for all my 35s. And then for the weapon, I'm actually running the CM Frag Storm Heavy Shotgun. And there's a reason for that. It's actually a kinetic elemental, and being a kinetic elemental, I find that it hits a little bit harder in PvP, because especially in PvP, you'll find that most people stack energy in their defense instead of kinetic, because kinetic's a fairly unorthodox damage type, being primary. So I find that it will typically allow you to hit a little bit harder in PvP. Now, is it really necessary for PvE? No. But it also makes it kind of nice when you're running a group with other commandos and you're trying to figure out who's going to use what element. You don't have to worry about that, because for the most part, other people are not going to be running this banana shotgun. It's just going to be you. Yes, it looks atrocious, but that's okay. And then for the jewelry, pretty straightforward. It's the Juggernaut jewelry, which is going to be giving you the Strength, Constitution, and innate Devastation value with each piece. And then once you have the 5-piece bonus, you're getting this additional Constitution, Strength, and a 4% chance of Devastation while using heavy weapons. And you also get this cooldown reduction on Riddle Armor, which I find pretty helpful. And then for the backpack, I'm just running the Imperial Ace Field Pack. You can really run any of these higher tier backpacks. I mean, I have the Biohazard backpack here. You could run that as well. Doesn't really matter as long as you're targeting a high tier backpack. You could even go the Snow Trooper backpack if you wanted, especially if you're running the armor and you want that higher cold resistance. Totally up to you. But that's about it for the weapons and armor. So let's go ahead and delve into my buff items. Alright, so over to my buff items, I am actually running kind of a fairly standard buff item layout here. I mean, obviously I've got the Mustafarian Injector, Favor of the Elders. You're going to go get an Entertainer buff and Medic buffs. I run the Gacklebat Familiar. I actually like this buff the most on Commando just because of its value relative to the other ones. You're going to get 40 Precision, 40 Strength. Pretty darn beneficial on a Commando. I know you can go out there and get any combination of Familiars these days, but this is still the one I like to run for Commando. My power-ups are actually pure heavy weapon damage when I'm running group content. I could probably mix a heavy weapon critical chance in there. I just don't really find that I need to, because my critical chance is usually pretty high anyways. For my drink, I'm running Breath of Heaven, which as you can see right here is the additional 211 Constitution, or some variance therein depending on the quality of your drink, and the increased chance to dodge by 3%. The Biological Focus Crystal here, which I'm not going to activate now, but it's 250 Constitution. This, combined with the Breath of Heaven, is really going to make up for the fact that I do not have Constitution in my 35s. If I wasn't running these two combination of items, I would probably run Constitution in my standard 35s and then run like a precision-based food instead. So at the end of the day, it's kind of a bit of a wash how you choose to acquire those stats. Over here, this is what I activate in PvP. It's Rancor 8. It's going to reduce it's going to increase your snare resistance, so you're less likely to get snared. And then, of course, you've got your tactical stim here. So a fairly standard buff layout. So let's go ahead and move on to expertise. Alright, so over to expertise. Really nothing too fancy here. For most of you that play Commando, this should not come as much of a surprise, but I'm running basically the entire powered armor / stand fast tree here. I've got riddle armor, I've got the single target riddle armor and the multi-target riddle armor. It just depends on the situation on which one you're going to want to use. I just like the flexibility of having them both. I've got killing spree all the way upgraded so that I can get the additional targets from my killing spree. Suppressing fire, just because I find it incredibly useful in PvP to really slow down people, especially if you find yourself in a battle with like a smuggler or somebody who's melee. Being able to create distance and keep distance is going to be very, very important. I've got stim armor just because healing is about the weakest part of any commando, and then I've got 1 point and you'll regret that. Now this point is not necessary. This is kind of a flex point. I put it here just because I like the ability to get the you'll regret that buff if I get snared. Now it does put you over the kind of the hard cap for armor, right? You're going to be over 10,000 armor, so it's not necessary to have. Honestly, this point is pretty flexible. You can choose to put it here in diagnostic armor. You can put it here in cluster bomb, so when you swap you have just the base cluster bomb. You can increase your suppression efficiency. There's all kinds of things you can do with this free floating point. Over on the assault tree, pretty basic here as well. I've got enhanced precision and constitution. I've got the entire position secured tree, just because there's so much value in here. And then over here, also nothing out of the ordinary. I've got focus beam all the way down into lethal beam. I do not take the enhanced fuel canisters, and it's just because I'd have to rip points out of something more valuable. And having the action cost reduction of 5% per point and the passive dot doesn't matter a whole lot when you have position secured, because I'd rather take the points and put them here and get action cost reduced by 30% instead of putting them here and getting action cost reduced by 15%. So that's about it for the expertise. Now let's go ahead and move on to my stats. Alright, so here's going to be the base stats of this build without any additional buffs. And yes, I know I have the armor, or the power-ups active down here. They're my heavy weapon damage power-ups. It won't let me click them off my toolbar, and I'm not waiting 18 minutes, so just ignore those for now. They don't affect any of this. But as you can see, with what I'm currently running, I've got 715 strength, 385 constitution, really nothing modified here in stamina, 565 precision, 85 agility, and 410 luck. With 8600 of the standard armors, I'm just running battle armor layout, and then I've got 7400 of every other special resistance except for cold, where I've got that additional 500 from the snowtrooper armor. So if you go over here to skill mods, you can see where my heavy weapon damage is higher. It's up to 37%, and that's because I'm running 3 heavy weapon damage power-ups right now. But as it stands, without any additional buffs affecting anything else, I've got 9% flat heavy weapon critical chance, and then 11.4% block. So I'm going to go ahead and add the rest of my buffs, and then we'll take another look at these stats. Alright, so now that we're buffed up, let's take another look at our stats here. We've got 935 strength, 1216 constitution, 295 stamina, 995 precision, 185 agility, and 410 luck, with our standard armor sitting at right about 10,000, which is perfect, and we're at 22,468 health, which is pretty darn good. Now, if I had taken constitution in my 35s, this number would be a little bit higher. I'd be looking at an additional 2,500 HP, so you'd be sitting right about 25,000, which I just don't think is incredibly necessary. I'd rather sit at about 22,500 and enjoy this 410 luck. So now if you go over to our skill mods, you can see that right here we're still at 37% heavy weapon damage, but our combat offensive critical chance is up to 40%. And then if I pop stand fast, or excuse me, not stand fast, position secured, my armor is going to go up a little bit more than it needs to, but I am now sitting at 1,135 strength with 1,195 precision. So we are going to be hitting incredibly hard, and this build will perform for you quite well. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to include some footage at the end of this, just doing some content so that you can see the build in action. If anybody has any questions or comments or suggestions, please feel free to put them down in the comments below. I always love hearing your guys' input, so anything that you've got, throw it at me and we'll see what we can do to incorporate it into the next one. And with that, here's the footage. Alright, so here we are. I just wanted to show you all how this build performs in PvE. I needed to farm the Kubasu Beetle Foreman anyways, because I'm trying to get my hands on a sprint stim without buying one. So I just figured I'd use it as a good demonstration, so please enjoy the footage. Alright, and now on to the Foreman. And there we go. And yes, before anybody says anything, I know I could have played that better, but it worked out. And there you go, that's how the build performs in PvE. Like I said, it's going to be heavier on the damage side, lighter on the tankier side. So it is going to be a little more difficult to solo a lot of PvE content, but it still functions. In the group PvE setting, you're going to be doing high DPS. It's really going to perform well, and also it performs really well in PvP. So I'm not going to be able to include any of that footage here, but I will be streaming here pretty soon, so if anybody wants to catch it live, please feel free to join me at any time. So that's all for today. As always, I hope you've enjoyed. Please hit like and subscribe down below, and I'll see you next time.